All right, well, welcome back, everybody, for our Wednesday adult conversation. And I always call it the adult conversation, as we said, because theoretically, we should have a huge pool of people that we can gather from everyone who has their kids over in religious ed, and the kids go there and the adults come here. So it's not so much normally that the topics we talk about are incredibly sensitive topics. It's just the adult conversation so that everyone will feel happy. Someone was mentioning last time when they came that they've got some non-Catholic friends that they think would really like this. That's part of my idea for doing these is that eventually, as we start to publicize it a little bit more, not just the millions who watch online will catch it, but even the hundreds who will come here one day. And it would be something to bring your non-Catholic friends to. Oftentimes, we're at a disadvantage a little bit in the evangelization area as Catholics is, a lot of times Protestants can just say, hey, come to services with me, and you bring them to the Protestant service, especially if you go to like a mega church or something, and you get your coffee, you go in, you sit down, relax in your comfy chair, watch the show, raise your hands in the air, have a good time, and you come out. You don't have to really know a thing about what happened, but you feel good because it's the religious show. That's not that all Protestant worship is like that. Some Protestant worship looks more Catholic than Catholic worship. I went to a high Anglican service once, it was even a Lutheran church, and they celebrated Mass ad orientem and did all kinds of things. And I'm like, yeah, we used to do that when we were Catholic. So sometimes Protestant worship looks more Catholic than Catholic. But if you're from a church that is super kind of, engaged, and the liturgy is very free, then sometimes you can say, hey, why don't you come to service with me? And people can get a lot out of it without knowing anything. The Catholic Mass is not like that. You can't, as an outsider, just show up at a solemn Catholic Mass without feeling a little bit like, what the heck is going on? I don't get this. What is that? Why did they do that? It's for insiders. So, I love NASA. I went down to Cape Canaveral to the Kennedy Space Center and the Air Force Base down there. And I remember I went to the launch platform for Apollo 1. Now, if you remember, Apollo 1 is the one where the 3 astronauts died in a fire on the launch pad in just a test. There is nothing there today except a bit of concrete where everything used to be. But I went there and I'm just like almost in tears, and I'm just, if you took a picture of me, I'm standing on a piece of concrete in the middle of nowhere with nothing around, and I know what happened there, and so it's incredibly moving for me because I know what that's about. Catholic Mass is a lot like that. If you just come upon it, you might come into a beautiful church that's incredibly appealing. We lead with beauty, as Bishop Barron's always talking about in his Word on Fire kind of theology approach. So you might come into a beautiful Catholic church and say, holy cow, this is beautiful, this is otherworldly. If so, good. Then the architecture is doing its job. But other than the beautiful architecture, and perhaps you come in and, at least on TV, when everyone enters a Catholic church, there's always Gregorian chant, because everybody knows that's Catholic, except Catholics these days. We tend not to do it, but if you're going to put a Catholic church in the movies, you're going to go into a big stone church with stained glass windows, and Gregorian chant is going to be coming out of it, because everybody knows that stuff's Catholic. But other than that, you're not going to understand the liturgy. So I wanted to do something that would perhaps be easier to invite our non-Catholic friends to. That's what this is about. So the adult conversation is somewhat, it's not threatening. You can come to one week, not come the next week, check it online. You could sit in your comfy chair in your pajamas at home if you want and watch it on YouTube, because it's up there every week. You can go to ShawnTheBaptist.org, click on the YouTube channel there, and it's always up there, and then you can share it with your, a couple thousand followers that you have, and maybe I'll actually get some people to watch this video. So share it around. But tonight's adult conversation, at least we're going to start off a little bit on something that is kind of I suppose, adult topic. Today is the anniversary of the very tragic and shameful Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision in our country. So if you follow any of the news, you will of course notice that it's not covered because, today in Topeka, we had a bunch of young people marching for life there on the Capitol and had a big, huge rally. Tomorrow night, there'll be the National Prayer Vigil for Life in Washington, D.C. at the big Basilica, the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, which was my parish when I went to school there. So it's the biggest Catholic church in the Western Hemisphere. And then on Friday is the big National March for Life in Washington, D.C. There's one on in California, the March for Life West Coast, and it's kind of sad that we have to keep doing that every year, but every year since Roe versus Wade was passed, people have gathered back in Washington to march. And I can tell you that when I lived in Washington, I know that from talking to the insiders in the National Park Service, things like that, and people that are in the know and cover it, it is the single biggest event in Washington every year. Every year. I mean, 500,000 on a full year. If the weather's bad, it might be more like 300,000. But it is the largest event in Washington, D.C. every year. We just celebrated Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I always like to make sure we remember he was a preacher. He's a solid Christian. That's what motivated him. But celebrated him on Monday, and a lot of you will remember that. Well, not a lot of you anymore. This is a young group. But the March for Jobs and Freedom on Washington back in the 60s, that march where Martin Luther King was there, obviously he gave a famous speech, and people celebrate the anniversary of that, and that was one time, and it was a couple 100,000. That's it. We have the March for Life every year. That's 500,000 people, and you would think nothing happens because the media doesn't really cover it. You never know about it. One time I remember I was watching on TV, and one of the more liberal-leaning stations, shall we say, was covering it, and the person back in the studio asked the person who was live on the scene, Jim, can you tell? Is there more of one side or the other there? And he's like looking around like, well, you see people from both sides here. I've been to the March for Life so many times. There are 400,990 pro-life people marching and 13 pro-abortion people who don't march, who are at the Supreme Court, and just show up with their signs and go home. It is not like, well, it's hard to tell. There's a little bit of both here. It's ridiculous. Another person I saw one year like, the real question here today, where are all the young people? Ever been to the pro-life march in Washington, D.C.? The average age is probably about 7. I mean, tons of high school and college kids. The March for Life is made up of probably 75% of people between the ages of 16 and 22. I mean, it is by far dominated with youth. But literally, there was a reporter there, like, where are the young people? I'm like, are you looking around? So they deliberately try to miscover the March for Life every year, and still we come, and it happens every year. And I've lost track more than 10 times. And obviously it was a little bit easier when I lived in Washington, D.C. Instead of a 24-hour bus ride, it was like a 24-minute metro ride down to it. Although I will say when I didn't get to go on the bus, like when I was in seminary, we flew to the March for Life. It didn't quite seem like the March for Life because taking the 24-hour bus ride from Kansas, I've done that a number of times. It's kind of part of the experience. Like if you just fly in and show up, it's like, oh wow, this is the March for Life. We're here. It doesn't quite feel right. It is a bit of spiritual warfare that we do there, kind of a sacrifice that we're able to offer. And God always works through it, even if the media is not going to cover it. All these young people that are exposed to it, they go home, they spread this message amongst their peers, and we start to see that ever since Roe versus Wade, America has become more and more and more pro-life, more against abortion, more in favor of respect for all human life. So tonight, I said last week we're going to kind of do questions too. So I'm going to talk about a few things maybe related to the current state of the pro-life movement, some ways that we can be perhaps ready as Catholics, as just logical thinking people, to defend the dignity of all people, even people who are still inside their mother's wombs or people who might be near death. We can talk a little bit about death penalty and the dignity of people who have still, committed serious crimes, things like that. So we can get into a lot of that. I think probably as Catholics, we know that you cannot be Catholic and pro-abortion. They are irreconcilable. You can't be Christian and pro-abortion. It doesn't work together. We can't at the one time say that God, the author of all this, chose to become human and incarnate and then disparage the dignity of the human person. God himself became a human person and entered this world not as God triumphant over his creation, but as a single cell zygote in the womb of his mother Mary, who then became an embryo and became a fetus and became an infant, and he was always God from the first moment of his existence in the womb of his mother Mary. That's when the incarnation took place. At the moment of the Annunciation, when our Blessed Mother says, "Fiat mihi, let it be done to me, as you have said," God becomes incarnate and exists as the smallest entity of human life inside Mary, and the incarnation took place at that moment. I'm going to the Holy Land tomorrow. So, by the way, no class next week. I'll be a little busy, probably hanging out in the tomb of Jesus or something. So in the Holy Land, if you go to Nazareth, to the place where Mary had her home in Nazareth, you can go there. They've excavated, they've found the home of Mary. And today, on top of the home of Mary, is built a big, huge church, the Basilica of the Annunciation. Because it is here that the angel Gabriel knocked on the door of Mary. I don't know if he knocked on the door. He probably just came in. He's an angel. As we talked about, remember, angels are pure spirit, so whatever. They can just come in when they want to. Kind of scary. Watch, your bedroom at night. But yeah, angels can go where they want to. So somehow the angel Gabriel and Mary are in her house. And so if you go to Nazareth, you can go down to the crypt level, the basement of the church, and there is the house of Mary. Parts of which have been miraculously perhaps transported to Loreto in Italy. You might have seen that the Holy Father created the Feast of Our Lady of Loreto and added it to the church calendar. Part of Mary's house from Nazareth, the walls, some of them have, according to tradition, been brought to Loreto in Italy. Maybe by angels, in that there was a family called the Angeli family, which means angels, or miraculously by angels. Whatever. Nonetheless, Mary's house in Nazareth, part of the original one, is there. And I had the great opportunity to, when I was in seminary, I lived in the Holy Land for about 10 weeks. We took an entire winter trimester and studied there. And so after all the tourists had left one day, we were staying right next to the Basilica. And so I went back that night, and everybody was gone, and the little house of Mary that normally has gates across it, it was open. And so I was able to just go in the house of Mary. I didn't knock or anything. There didn't appear to be anybody home. Well, I take that back. Jesus was there. There's the tabernacle. So isn't that cool to think that today in the house of Mary, 24/7 is the Word incarnate, Jesus Christ, in the Eucharist, in the tabernacle. I mean, that's just amazing. So I went in there and just got to sit down in Mary's house by myself, and was just overwhelmed almost by the thought that these walls were the very first walls to witness and hear the words Ave Maria, Hail Mary, Kyrie Keritomene, or however in Greek, and whatever language you would have spoke to Mary, probably Hebrew. To be in that spot. And there's a great little inscription under the altar, because it's a little chapel in there now. And the words from the Gospel of John famously are that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, from the beginning of the Gospel of John. In Latin, it's verbum caro factum est. The Word was made flesh. Verbum caro factum est. In Mary's house in Nazareth, it actually says under there, verbum carum hic factum est. Literally, the Word became flesh here. Like, right here. Right at this very spot. This is where the angel Gabriel said, "You are to be the mother of God." And she says, "Okay. Fiat mihi secundum verbum tuum. Let it be done to me according to your word." And the Word was made flesh. Right there. on that spot. It's just amazing to think about. What a great kind of gospel passage for us to keep in mind as we remember something so tragic as the spread of the legality of abortion. When we first started laws about abortion, if you read the actual Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision, the justices actually admit, there's a debate about when life begins. So we don't know if there's life in the womb. Now think about that. Can we say that today? Remember, Roe versus Wade, 1973, took place before the sonogram. We didn't have sonogram. So there was debate about when does life begin. Okay, and that's right in the Supreme Court decision. When does life begin? We don't know. Therefore, Roe versus Wade came up with this trimester thing. That's where the origin of the trimesters come from. In the first trimester, they thought that there was less possibility that life had begun. So states were allowed to freely regulate abortion in the first trimester. Second trimester, we're a little more borderline, so there's more restrictions. And all states were allowed to outlaw abortion in the third trimester because we were pretty sure that there was life there at that point. You're like, well, wow, that's not what we do at all. Well, unfortunately, Roe versus Wade was not the only Supreme Court decision at that time to affect it. There was also then Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which most people are not familiar with. But this radically rechanged abortion law because a lot of states were outlawing abortion in the third trimester, as sensible people would recognize. Of course, there's a baby there. I mean, what's the difference between a baby a moment before it's born and a moment after it's born? Surely we can admit that a baby in the third trimester is really a baby and alive. Again, ironic that we can't even do that today, or even after babies are born. Now we're not sure if they're babies. But at that time, they came up with this instead undue burden statute. We hear that all the time today, that you can only regulate abortion to the extent that it does not create an undue burden on the woman. And that's kind of the legal side of it. And like, well, what's an undue burden? Exactly. It's been interpreted to say, I would feel embarrassed not to be able to go to my high school prom because I would look pregnant. That's an undue burden, so you can kill your baby legally. I mean, just crazy kind of things. But perhaps the most crazy thing in Planned Parenthood versus Casey is a statement that is not legal at all. Rather, it is deeply philosophical. And you're like, why is the Supreme Court doing philosophy? Good question, because they're not very good at it. The Supreme Court are lawyers, they're judges, they are not philosophers, although in history, as the Catholic Church helped invent the study of law and philosophy, we would recognize that law should be based in sound philosophy, but this one very much was not. And so there's a famous statement in this Planned Parenthood versus Casey case in which Justice Kennedy, writing for the majority, says that at the heart of liberty is the right for each person to define for themselves I want to get the words in the right order. The meaning of life, existence, the universe, and let's find it real quick. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life. Let's unpack that. At the heart of liberty. So we hear the word liberty as Americans, and we're like, yeah, liberty, Statue of Liberty. We're all about freedom, liberty as Americans. Yes, death to tyrants, pull down statues of George III, throw tea into Boston Harbor. Give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry says. We love liberty. So problem is we often interpret liberty meaning I can do whatever the heck I want. Okay, that's not liberty. That's what we would call license. License means I just do whatever the heck I want. Liberty is deeper. True freedom, liberty, libertas in Latin, is freedom, means that I am free to live according to my existence and become who I've been created to be. Nothing inhibits me from being who I'm created to be by God. You really can't understand liberty without God. So Justice Kennedy is saying at the heart of liberty meaning the very essence of what liberty is, means I have the right. Notice another very American thing, my rights. I've got my right. I get to do this, and I feel empowered to define one's own concept of existence. All right, that's getting pretty philosophical of meaning. All right, I mean, I guess we can all find our own meaning. But define one's own concept of the universe? Do we create the universe? I mean, do we create the laws and the principles of the universe? I mean, do I get to define my own concept of gravity? Like, for me, I think things should fall up. I think ice should sink. I think I ought to be able to fly to the moon by flapping my arms. Do I really have the control to define the meaning of the universe? No. In fact, all of science was born from the Catholic Church, by the way. We invented the scientific method. Science was always about discovering the meaning that is there. Okay, I'm going to find how the universe works. I don't inflict my will upon the universe. Rather, I'm here. I am in it, and I'm going to find out how it works. Gregor Mendel with his pea plants and genetics. I want to find out how traits get passed on. Why do some people have blue eyes and brown eyes? And what if they're... I want to find out. He doesn't decide for me, I think brown eyes will come from parents with blue eyes. No, you find out what's there. But notice, if you approach science that way, it means you are accepting that there is actually order, structure, law to the universe. I can't just impose my will upon it. Rather, it imposes its will upon me. Whether I like it or not, things are going to fall down. At least from our little relative perspective of being on Earth. We get Einstein in there and, what is gravity and warped space and all this. And we get into quantum mechanics and then space-time continuum, and it gets more complicated. But we'll stick with, just not Einstein relative physics. We'll stick with Newtonian kind of physics. Well, in that case, things fall down. Apple falls on the tree, hits Sir Isaac Newton, aha, gravity. He does not have the power to define it for himself, to say, I think apples will fall up. We don't. And yet, here is a Supreme Court justice saying, we have the right to define the meaning of the universe and even life itself. Wow. We have that kind of power? No, we don't. Okay, we can say personally for us, like, here's how I'm going to find, expression to my life, things like that. I'm certainly free to say I find beauty in the stars, or I hate the stars, I like plants, flowers are beautiful. You could say, I don't get it, I don't like flowers. Fine. You don't get to say, you know what, for me, I think the sky's green. Now, and you're like, well, that's stupid. You can't say the sky's green. Well, we do exactly that all the time in the way that we interpret laws. This Planned Parenthood versus Casey line, that we have the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, of life itself, we use that all the time. If you want to say that the sky is green, you can do that today, and people will literally say, well, who am I to judge? I mean, if they want to say the sky's green, fine, great. The problem with doing that is the sky is still what it is. We don't define a new meaning on the sky. We don't change its color. Green is a word. And so if we use the word green to describe the sky, we didn't change its color. We just now need a new word for blue. You just made it harder to talk logically with everybody about the sky. Notice we're doing that all the time with our words. We change the semantics, and more scary, I mean, if someone wanted to say the sky is green, like, okay, he's just a little crazy. But what we're doing today is actually saying the sky is green, and the government is going to force everyone to admit that the sky is green. And if you don't, we're going to punish you, because it's hateful to tell people who know the sky is green that it's really blue. And so we make laws like that. We have to acknowledge that two people of the same sex can get married. Well, okay, then you just need another word for marriage. If marriage is any two people that want to come together to mutually pleasure each other and somehow commit to each other. Okay, that you can call that marriage, but then what are you going to call the unique relationship between man and woman that come together in a permanent state of life to give themselves to each other and from which new humans come? Now you just need another word for that. So we really have to pay attention, I think, to the words, the semantics, that yes, we can create words and say what words apply to what, but we do not create the underlying meaning. The sky stays blue no matter what we want to call it. The same is true with the language that we use to talk about life, the science behind when does life begin. We can change words all around, but we're really not changing the essence of things. An example of this, back several years now when we were first starting to look at these, they call it like emergency contraception sort of things, really a high dose of contraception that you have unprotected sex, as they call it, as if you could ever protect yourself during sex. If you're having intimate relations with someone and you want to protect yourself, there's a good chance you're not using your body correctly. Just as an aside, you shouldn't have to protect yourself when you're giving yourself entirely to another person. If you're doing an act that's about giving yourself entirely to another person permanently forever, and I want children with you, and you have to protect yourself, you're doing it wrong. Just as an aside, we can talk about that later. But anyway, so you have this emergency contraception. All right? Well, it says on the instructions and in the explanation that if you are pregnant, this has no effect. People ask, will this cause an abortion? Absolutely not. If you are pregnant, this will not cause an abortion. It only prevents pregnancy. So, oh, okay. But you do the research, and actually what they did was they redefined what the word pregnant means. You would think if you're pregnant, that means you have a baby inside you. But no. They redefined the definition of what it means to be pregnant to say you're only actually pregnant when the baby implants in the mother's uterine wall and begins to grow to a certain size. Then you're pregnant. But when the baby is conceived and fertilized and is moving through the fallopian tube and growing and has become several hundred cells, well, yes, the abortifacient contraception, the emergency contraception, attacks the lining of the uterine wall, hardens it so that the new little baby cannot implant and spontaneously aborts. But they'll say, oh, no abortion, you're not pregnant. See, semantics. Redefine the word pregnant then. All the time, we'll say that, well, a woman who's pregnant, it's not a baby. Not a baby. It's just a clump of cells. Okay? I am just a clump of cells. Physically speaking, we know we're body and soul, but I'm just a bigger clump of cells. So are we going to say that ultimately someone's human dignity comes from how big they are? If so, I lost a lot of human dignity in the last year because I lost 100 pounds. So I'm not dignified at all anymore. At least I lost dignity all over the place. All of us instinctively kind of get that, all right, we don't gain more dignity the bigger we get. Well, what about dependence then? A little baby in his mother's womb is dependent upon the mother for everything. So if you're completely dependent upon another human being, obviously you're not human. Yeah, well, my grandma's coming to the end of her life, and she can't get out of bed herself. She can't do anything for herself. All she does is really sleep. She is 100% dependent on other human beings for her existence in every way right now. Does she have less dignity because of that? Is she less human because she's not able to take care of herself? Well, sadly, today, some people would say, yes, kill her, euthanasia, yay. No, she has all the human dignity she had at the moment she was a one-cell person in the womb of my great-grandmother. You don't lose or gain human dignity based on your level of dependence. If so, handicapped people, people with special needs, they're all less dignified. We see society says that today too. We as Catholics say, no, our dignity does not come from our abilities. Well, what about completeness? What if you don't have all your body parts yet? That little embryo doesn't quite have hands and feet and the ability to think for ourselves. So maybe that is what determines dignity. Well, I could become a quadriplegic tomorrow, lose all my limbs. Does that take away my dignity? Did I lose part of my dignity when part of my body? No. Again, I'm losing cells all the time. I'm floating around as dust here and things as I exfoliate my cells. Is my dignity flying away? No. These are all the kind of things that, if you think logically about it, all right, if we can agree that a baby after it's born is a baby and entitled to all the rights and privileges of being a member of the human race, when do you get that? Is it only at birth? If so, why? What is so magic about being in your mother's womb and the next minute being out of your mother's womb? What is it that is so magic? There's a great little YouTube video. You can Google it. Actually, it's like the magic birth canal. Someone actually creates a little plastic birth canal and talks about the magic that happens as you go through from this moment over here, you're nothing. But then you go through the magic birth canal and now you have human rights. What is that magic moment? What is so special about birth? Like, well, birth, you come out, you take your first breath. Okay, your fetal breathing in your mom, amniotic fluid going in and out of your lungs, so everything is working. You're in your mom breathing. We do surgery on little babies in the womb now. The same doctor who could go in and take his scalpel and hack a baby to death in abortion, now we go in with scalpels and we prepare spina bifida. We do operations on spines. We close cleft palates. We do all kinds of surgeries on babies in the womb. Is that rearranging a clump of cells? There's some great videos of a baby that in the amniotic sac, in the mother, they took all the way out, did some surgery, and put the baby all the way back in. Did the baby get human rights while it was outside of its mom and then lose them when they went back in? What about the baby that they took out and it's still in the amniotic sac and it hasn't taken its first breath, but there it is sitting on the table? Is that not a human being yet, even though it's completely outside of its mom and not dependent on anybody because it hasn't taken his or her first breath? These are the kind of tangled things you have to go through in your head to remain pro-abortion. So the good news for us as pro-life is science is on our side, facts are on our side, just common sense is on our side. The only real argument in favor of abortion right now is kind of the one that is in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. I just want to do what I want to do. It's not about when life begins now. That question has been easily answered. At the time of Roe versus Wade, we didn't have a sonogram machine, so most people could know that life was there in the womb. Mothers who are pregnant in the second trimester feel their baby's kicking. So, wow, an alien kicked me. People knew, of course, there's life, but was there legal proof that a baby is alive in its mother's womb? Well, from a legal standpoint, it was questionable, so they punted and said, we don't know if there's life in the mother's womb. But if you read Roe versus Wade, it actually says, if later that proves not to be true, that maybe life does begin earlier than we thought, then this decision would need to be revisited. Well, you would think we would have done that by now then, because shortly after Roe versus Wade, we got sonograms, and now every mom and dad who are expecting, what's the first thing you do? You go to the doctor, you get a sonogram, and you put it on your refrigerator, and today you post it all over Facebook. How many times are you scrolling through Facebook, and there's a picture of a blob of cells in black and white? No, baby, and they'll circle face, feet, second face, twins, and now we don't even have just sonograms that are two-dimensional. We have 4D, real live, put a camera in the mother and wave to your baby. We could go in with live pictures and, from 12 weeks on, it fully formed hands and feet and toes and fingers, and you look at, that's a baby. No doubt anymore when life begins. You can look with your own eyes, anyone who wants to see it. You don't need medical textbooks, which, by the way, all the medical textbooks admit. New life, an irrepeatable new life with its own unique DNA that is different from its mother and father, begins to exist from the moment of fertilization. From the time that sperm meets egg and fertilization happens, and there's that new zygote that is created, that is a unique individual that is not the tissue of the mother. It's not the tissue of the father. It has completely different DNA, the same way my DNA is not my dad and not my mom. It's a new entity. That happens at fertilization. And from that moment, there is no other moment from the time that that happens until the time we die where you could draw a line and say, okay, this is the monumental moment where human dignity happens, or when life happens. From the moment you are a fertilized egg, you are forever you, and just dividing and growing and getting bigger. And then as soon as you get big enough to be born, pretty much shortly after that, you start dying. And so the whole rest of your life, after you get to a certain size and ability, is a gradual dying away and falling apart. Your human dignity stays the same all throughout there. Why? And this is where we need philosophy to tell us, theology, philosophy, because human dignity doesn't come from anything within us. Okay? Think about that. Human dignity does not come from within us. It has to come from outside of us. Otherwise, human beings can always decide who has dignity and who doesn't. But amazingly, at the heart of liberty in our country, actually we have to go back to the Declaration of Independence. There we have a better definition of what it means to be free in America. And it says that each of us is endowed by our Creator. So notice we're appealing to something outside of the human realm. If dignity comes from humans, then other humans can take it away or force us out of our human dignity. We're saying as Americans, our dignity does not come from the king bestowing it. It doesn't come from any other body or anything. It comes from our Creator. And not just for us as Americans, but everybody. We as human beings are endowed with certain unalienable rights. I mean, you can't take them away. You can't legislate them out of existence. You could legislate that a baby is not alive, but it would be like legislating the sky is green. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Notice that life is first. Where do we get the right to life? From God, from our Creator. Because as any human being will be able to tell you, we don't create life. New life in this world comes from a principle that operates outside of it. God Himself gives us our dignity and allows us to be co-creators with Him. If you blow that apart, then you've lost all of human dignity, and you've lost our relationship with God, and you've lost any actual source for meaningful existence, and you are left with Planned Parenthood versus Casey, where at the heart of liberty is the right of everyone to decide for themselves the meaning of existence, of meaning of the universe, and of life itself. Well, we know that ultimately all those things, the meaning, the laws of the world, everything come from outside the world. They come from God. And so that's where there's overlap between pro-life people and religious people. But you don't need to be religious to be pro-life. I mean, we have kind of the added bonus of being able to say, what's it all about, Alfie? You know, we can say, yeah, this is why it's beautiful. But any thinking person can logically reason to the pro-life position, and there's no way to reason logically to a pro-abortion position. Unless you do essentially what we're saying sometimes today, and it's simply will to power. Today, notice, no one argues anymore about when life begins. When I was first getting started in the pro-life movement, we were still arguing about when does life begin, and say, well, we don't know, therefore Roe versus Wade is the law of the land. Nobody makes those arguments anymore. Look at the last time you saw someone try to make an argument that abortion's okay because we don't know when life begins. We know when life begins. So now, notice all the rhetoric is, it's a woman's right to choose. But choose what? I mean, they don't want to talk about that because what they're saying, it's a woman's right to choose to kill a baby. Okay? That's what it's about today. It's not about when does life begin. We used to say, of course we would never kill a baby. We would never do that. It's just that this probably isn't a baby inside a woman, so that's why it's okay to have abortion. We would never kill a baby. Now, people on the pro-abortion side today have no qualms telling you it is a woman's right to kill a baby if she wants to, because she shouldn't be forced to have to raise this child, to provide for them. If she doesn't want that baby, it's up to her to decide that she doesn't want it and choose. No one ever wants to be pressed on choose what. Choose to have someone stick sharp instruments inside you and rip the arms and legs off your baby. No, they won't say that. So it's just choose. So one of the best things we can do in the pro-life movement, show people babies inside the womb of their mother. Sadly, that is not as effective today as it used to be because everybody already knows that. So show people what abortion does. Most people are actually horrified to see what abortion is. No one, if pressed, would probably say, yes, I think everyone should have the right to do this. And certainly the people that think abortion is good, no one would ever look at an actual abortion and say it's good. I would hope a lot of us have seen the movie Unplanned about Abby Johnson, who ran a Planned Parenthood clinic. When she actually saw an abortion take place on a sonogram, she immediately left her job and became pro-life and is now one of the great pro-life people. So to see abortion is to be against abortion. So most people who are pro-choice have never seen an abortion. They don't really know what it is. Rather, it's this idea of not liberty, but license. My autonomy to say I can do whatever the heck I want. And if I don't want this, I shouldn't have to have it. And the only reason you get away with it is because you can't hear babies scream in abortion. That's really what it comes down to. Dr. Bernard Nathanson, he was known as the abortion king in New York City in the 70s, did tens of thousands of abortions, he said, before sonograms. And then he saw his first sonogram and became one of the greatest pro-life people in the history of the movement. And he made a famous video called The Silent Scream. And you can Google that. It's really old now because it's just sonogram, not the 4D video technology. But he made a movie called The Silent Scream and shows the little baby in the mother's womb on the sonogram live as an abortionist comes in and rips the baby apart. No words, no nothing, just show it. And it totally changed him, and it changed the pro-life movement. And that's why a lot of the pro-life witness today is just get mothers to see a sonogram. You don't have to impose values on people. Just show them. Say, is this really what you're choosing? Because lots of people would say, I choose that I would prefer not to be pregnant when I'm not married. I will that I don't want to raise a child when I don't have the money to do it. We can come up with lots of reasons to say why a person would maybe not want a baby at a particular time or wish they weren't pregnant. Maybe I could come up with good reasons why I want the sky to be green. I don't know. But it is. I mean, you're already pregnant. So abortion doesn't make you unpregnant. It makes you the mother of a dead baby. And as I say that, I mean, hopefully all of us kind of cringe at that, and I do too. And so let me maybe end tonight by saying that I think it is important that we talk honestly about this and not there's a reason why people always say pro-choice. No one wants to say what they're actually in favor of choosing, because what they're in favor of choosing is horrific. So we couch it in words. So I was maybe, if saying it so directly tonight was hurtful to anyone or caused reactions, I partly apologize because that's uncomfortable. On the other hand, we need to be uncomfortable. So I'll end maybe tonight by just kind of saying that maybe when I was first starting out in the pro-life movement, I was very bent on this is a baby, this is life, and that kind of aspect of pro-life. As I've been a priest more and worked with women who are post-abortive, I've very much become much more focused on abortion needs to end because it hurts women. It is devastating to women, no matter how pro-abortion people say they are now. And I'm, happy I had my abortion. They wind up in my office 10, 20, sometimes 30 years later, and it has wrecked their life. Sometimes 30 years ago they had an abortion, and it has wrecked their life. I think maybe we've all known people who have experienced this. I can tell you as a priest, you meet it a lot. One of my favorite witnesses at the March for Life is every year a group of women from what's called the Silent No More campaign, all women who have had abortions and now have to deal with the reality. And they simply stand on the stage holding a sign that says, "I regret my abortion." And it is just powerful because it smacks in the face of the lie that Satan allows the pro-abortion lobby to tell. So we should always be incredibly, incredibly compassionate and merciful for women who, I will say it, have been victims of the abortion industry. Okay, sometimes people are like, oh, pro-life people, we want to condemn like women who in a crisis, chose to have an abortion. No, women who do have abortions don't choose it. Much as we want to say, yay, choice, almost never. When I'm outside of a Planned Parenthood and I'm trying to counsel people, you'll find embarrassed fathers who drive their daughters there because they're not going to have my daughter pregnant in high school. You'll find boyfriends who want to shirk their responsibility. We're going to have sex, but, oh, you're pregnant? We'll take care of it. Greatly, greatly undermining the dignity of women. Women are, in their ability to bear children and to receive this gift of life, some of the most beautiful creations that God has made. And it's no coincidence then that the devil wants to attack that very dignity of women, the thing that it makes them incredibly, uniquely special and like God to be able to gestate and bring new life into the world. No wonder Satan wants to undermine that and hit at the heart of some of the greatest sorts of dignity of women. Not that women are just about, oh, let's have children. No. It's in the entire psychology of the beautiful gift of receptivity of woman, creativeness, fruitfulness, all that goes together, and Satan wants to attack that. Likewise, Satan wants to attack men whose vocation, protect women. Be co-creators with them. Love them. Lay down your life for your wife, the way Christ lays down his life for his church. Okay? Ephesians 5, St. Paul, that passage everybody hates. Oh, wives, be submissive to your husbands. No, husbands, lay down your life for your wives. Sacrifice for them the way Christ died for his bride, the church. Abortion hits at the heart of that too. Every man who would allow some fake doctor to violate his wife like that and kill his child has failed in his dignity as a man and as a father, and they know it. You know that you've just used a woman for nothing. You have created a new life which you then consented to or caused to be murdered. It hurts the dignity of man. Notice that this coming together as man and woman to create new life is how we are most like God. We are co-creators with God through that gift. And so Satan wants to blow that apart and make it so we don't even recognize it anymore. So we gotta fight back, not with condemnatory accusations against people, because we're victims of this. So we need to take back our dignity. Men need to protect women, not take them to abortion mills. Women need to, in times of crisis, rely on that beautiful help to be sustained, to get through crisis. Because the truth is, the crisis will pass. And I've never met any woman who had her baby and then said, yeah, I wish I'd had an abortion. That just almost never, you see it a little bit today, sadly, but almost never happens. In fact, Roe versus Wade, she never even had the abortion. She had her baby. So tonight, I want to lift up just all the women, especially, the men too, but especially the women who have been victims of the abortion industry, a billion dollar industry that is not there to help people. They're there to make money and make lots of it at the expense of people's dignity. So unmask a bit of that tonight, a bit of the truth, some legal things, some theological things. Always free to talk about that. And if you know someone who has been involved in abortion, maybe they're a Planned Parenthood worker like Abby Johnson, or someone whose child maybe had an abortion and they're devastated by it because their granddaughter or grandson was killed, or you yourself that have not processed all through this. We have great ministries in the Archdiocese. Project Rachel is a healing ministry for all those affected by abortion, women who regret their abortion. Silent No More campaign I talked about. Be willing to listen as people come forward with their stories, and know that they have been victimized by a culture that lies to them and have been taken advantage of. And we as the church need to be there to hug them, really, welcome them back, and introduce them to the merciful love of Jesus that, he says, even if a mother would forsake her child, I will never abandon you. And that includes anyone who's involved in abortion, who's had abortion, been part of it. God will never abandon us. So I pray for all the little babies today that have been victims of abortion, and we pray are in heaven. There will be a great cloud of witnesses and an army to support us in this. And we pray that each of us, armed with the truth, would go out and not be afraid to speak the truth. When you hear someone say pro-choice, just ask them, choice to do what? And keep pressing them. Choice to do what? What does that mean? Well, what does that mean? And see if they're really in favor of that choice, because many people have made that choice and now regret it. So let's end with a little prayer tonight, and then I can maybe answer questions personally that you have. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord Jesus, we know that you are present here in our church, hidden in the disguise of the Eucharist in our tabernacle, and yet really present here. True God, true man, right here. When you came the first time, you chose to come as a little baby in the womb of Mary, your mother, who you had prepared to be your mother. We pray for all women tonight who are mothers and are not prepared, women who are scared and afraid, as our Blessed Mother Mary was when the angel came and told her, that like Mary, all those who struggle in a crisis right now would put their trust in God as Mary did, and that we who would call ourselves followers of you, disciples of Jesus, that we would bring your merciful compassion to a world that has been so wounded with this scourge stain of abortion. May there be no more victims. Protect all those women. Inspire men to protect women, to help them to choose life, to choose you. Restore the dignity of all those who feel they've lost it. Invite them to your mercy. Invite them to confession. Invite them to your beautiful gift of the Eucharist, that all of us, male and female, might rejoice to be that other time when one person lives inside another. When a baby lives inside its mom, when two men and women come together, and then the third time that one person is inside another, when you are inside us in the Eucharist, Jesus. May we bear that fruitfulness to the world and bring you to the world, especially your beautiful gift of mercy and healing. We ask you to bless everyone here tonight in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right, a little harder adult conversation tonight, but I think important. As I mentioned, I'll be in the Holy Land next week, so no adult conversation next week. Pray for me. I might be in the House of Mary next week, checking it out, or, hanging out on Calvary or Tomb of Jesus. So thank you all. Have a good night.